Hey, fellow leaders. Welcome to the Disrupt Leaders podcast. My name is Julian, and as always, I'm joined by your fantastically beautiful co host, Bill. And today we've got a ripper
Hey.
of a session today. We're going to be going into coaching and what that means for us and how you can approach coaching sessions.
Jules, I've got to say, I'm absolutely hyped for this one. Coaching is without a doubt my favorite part of the role. It is the reason I get out of bed in the morning. Super excited to talk about it. Super excited to go into a little bit more detail around what a real good coaching session looks like. Going to be an absolute banger, certified. I'm going to throw over to you though, Jules, because some of our listeners may not know what coaching actually is. They may think they know what coaching is. So I'm going to throw it to you, my friend. What is coaching?
Oh, good question. As you said, a lot of people think they know what coaching is. For me, coaching isn't a one-on-one. We spoke about this before. Not all one-on-ones are coaching sessions, but all coaching sessions can be one-on-ones. So what we're saying with that is your one-on-ones, your normal catch-ups that you have with people that sit under you or your direct reports, those are career building moments maybe, or overarching stuff that you're working on, or projects, or what's going on in their life right now. Those are little touch points you have with them. And that's maybe your one-on-ones, like your kind of regular stuff. Coaching for me is you're working at picking certain behaviors, certain things that they're doing on an everyday basis within their role, and working towards certain actions, commitments, objectives. But it's mainly a reflective conversation that you're having, if that makes sense. What do you think about that, Bill?
You've hit the nail on the head. One of the key differences between a good coaching session and something that's pretending to be a coaching session is that last part, that it's reflective. It is a lot of questioning, not a lot of telling. The acronym I hear people use all the time is think like an ant. You should be asking, not telling. And it's a bit cliche, but I do like it. It sticks to my mind, and we should be inquiring and getting more information out of them. Ultimately, that's what coaching is. It is. And the other point actually that you touched on that I loved is when you say you, it's not you as in me as the leader. It's you and the other person. Like a collaborative approach. That's what a coaching session is. It's not just me working and getting my outcomes out. It's me and the consultant working together to get their outcomes so that we can get where we want to be together. And that's what makes a good coaching session, in my opinion, which we'll get into a little bit more. But I guess the thing is, why should people be coaching that, right? Because not everybody does coach, I don't think. There's a lot of leaders in a lot of businesses that don't really structure and do a proper coaching session with their people semi-regularly. So that's a really important topic as well to kind of get into. And so first off, Jules, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with why I coach, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because in my opinion, coaching is the champagne of victory. It is the absolute pinnacle, the apex of my job. I've said it already. It is why I get out of bed in the morning. I absolutely love it. There is no sweeter moment as a leader, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Do not attempt to change my mind than seeing a consultant, sitting down, working together on some like certain behaviors, getting real granular specific, watching them go, take it away and flourish, and then watching the results it leads to. Nothing in this role is better than that whatsoever. And I absolutely love when my consultants come to me the following day, the day after, and being like, I just did that thing that you said and it worked and it's amazing. Oh my God, look at all these things that have happened. Everything's so much smoother, everything's so much better. Colors are brighter. You know what I mean? Like that, that for me is kind of what coaching's about. And the other thing, like to give a more accurate reason beyond my own personal selfishness of how much I enjoy coaching sessions, a good coaching session is what actually generates results for the business. Like if you actually want your people to improve, sitting down and telling them what to do is not going to achieve that. But working together to get into their motivations and what gets them ticking and get them thinking about their own actions is far more powerful. What do you think, Jules?
I felt like I was in a gospel church at that time, and I wanted to say amen the whole time because everything was fantastically well said just then, Bill. I'm right with you. Obviously, my role is I'm a performance coach. I'm a senior performance coach, so it's my day-to-day. But I still love it. I still love seeing things click for people, and especially
100%.
those that are the ones that you grind at day in, day out, the ones that you really struggle at. And also take personal pride from taking people that other people struggle with and going, can I get something out of this person? And if I can, that is amazing. I mean, that's like
you can spread that and put that on toast for me. I mean, like I'll eat that for breakfast in the morning.
For sure.
Freaking good.
You talk
I mean?
about there's a TikTok of a guy in like rollerblades, and he does a flip, and he's a bit overweight, and he goes, "This is what peak male performance looks like."
You may not like it, but
you may not like it, but this is what peak male performance looks like. I feel like saying that sometimes when I get a hard person and, quote unquote, the business seems a little bit harder to work with, and I get some performance out of them. Or let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. I don't get performance out of them. They get performance out of themselves. That's actually the most satisfying thing about coaching for me.
That's where the outcomes come from, though. That's why, like, and for a lot of you leaders out there, if you already are doing one-on-ones and stuff and you're finding you're not getting enough out of your people, my question is, are you coaching? Like, are you structuring that session properly? Are they driving their own actions, their own outcomes? But if not, that's absolutely fine, because Jules and I have gone through, we've put together a step-by-step process around how to coach. Now, probably, if you work somewhere, they will probably have some kind of coaching framework. They'll probably tell you to go to something. It's probably Grow, to be honest with you. It's probably the Grow framework. The Grow framework, I'm just going to very quickly touch on this. I'm not going to sit here and rip it to pieces because it has its place and it has its uses. I don't love it. Anytime that you start to like stick to a framework, it becomes a bit scripted. And it just needs to be a bit more dynamic. It needs to be a bit more of a flow. And for those of you that don't know, Grow is like goal, reality, options, way forward, something to that effect. There's variants of it. I always hate that goal is first. I don't see how, as a coach, we can work together on a goal if we don't know what the reality is. Like, you can sit there and be like, oh, my target's 1,000,003. And it's like, cool, well, you've done 6 in the last month. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean anything if we don't know what reality looks like. That's why it needs to be that bit more dynamic. So, Jules, question for you. Where do you start coaching? Where's the apex point, like the point where you start thinking about your coaching? What's the first move?
We touched on this in the last few episodes. And it usually starts with your prep, obviously. Kind of that preparation before the coaching session, for sure. Really doing those observations, doing the hard yards. We spoke about it before. I'll use the expression again. Their business is in the boring, right? Like, you want to do some of the boring things. You want to do the observations. You want to understand your person before you sit in front of them. For a couple of reasons. You want to trust that people come in having reflected on their performance. One thing I've learned over the years is not everyone is as reflective as you would like them to be. So it's good to have some observations to kickstart those reflections that you want to have. The second thing as well is, even if they are reflective, some people have different perceptions of how things have gone. So you want to have those observations, that prep, to really back up what you want to have in terms of outcomes at the end of that coaching session. So if you ain't prepping, you ain't having a coaching session, as far as I see. I mean, you're just having a conversation.
I would say this. Yeah, for sure. And probably not a very targeted conversation, right? And where a lot of leaders go wrong is they're not coaching because they're not doing preparation. They're coming into the session and then starting to ask questions and try to uncover things. Whereas if you've kind of got an idea of what you want to achieve before you go in, it's much easier to kind of like steer the ship. The consultant is still the one behind the wheel, but you're the one that's like the wind in the sails, if that kind of makes sense. I'm going to stick with the sea metaphor. But to the new leaders out there that haven't done this before, I know you're very clear. The preparation process is not long. So bullet point 1 of how to run a coaching session, prepare for the session. I'll talk about what prep looks like for me in regards to a coaching session, Jules, then see if you do anything different. First things first, review last coaching session's notes, assuming you've already done a coaching session with the person before, see what outcomes they agree to. And then from there, have a look at their KPIs. Like, if we'd worked towards a specific target, a specific goal, did they achieve that goal? How did we go versus our last previous target? If we haven't had a previous one, if it's our first proper one-on-one, where like we're getting into the nuts and bolts of it, I'll still probably look at the KPIs just to give me an idea of like where they're at, what they're up to. And then I'll cross-reference that with anything from my own observations. Like, usually when I'm doing like marking calls, there'll be some kind of record of that somewhere. I'll have a quick look through those. I'll have a quick look through my personal notes, because usually when I'm doing like live obs, I'll tend to take notes in the document I use to track my one-on-ones. And I'll kind of just prepare those two. And that's when I'll start to formulate my agenda. So we spoke about last time, it's very important to have an agenda for these meetings. And you may list a couple of things down and you may trim it back just before the session, but I'll try to nail on to like 1 or 2 things very specifically that I want to do. I'm probably getting a little bit ahead here. I'm probably skipping a step, but I'm just going to say, never have more than 2 points, I would say, that you're trying to work on, that you're trying to coach to, especially if we're talking a 20, 30-minute session at absolute max, the one-on-one's 30 minutes. You don't have time. If you attempt to do everything, you'll end up doing nothing. So pick 1. If 1 is best, 2 if necessary. If those 2 can kind of tie together, you're on dream state. So that's me, Jules. That's my preparation. What about yourself?
I want to kick off by, that's a great point. Last session, we said if you could take away anything jokingly to get system access, but not jokingly. With this session, if you want to take away at least one thing, please, for the love of God, do not discuss more than 2 behaviors you want the person that you're working with to take away, because it's just not humanly possible. I don't believe it. I don't believe there's anyone out there that can master more than one or two at a time, ideally one. That's a great thing to do. And that's where I'll kind of kick off in terms of my prep is through my observations, I'm trying to identify the one or two behaviors that are going to really give this person bang for buck. The best way I can do those through examples, right? So say, for example, you're in a sales environment again or a service environment. And what you've identified is that this person gets probably bad customer feedback, or clients seem to be kind of irritated over the phone or in person with this person, or whatever the case is, right? These interactions aren't going according to plan. And the one thing you identify is just their tone. Let's say, for example, their overall tone, they're not very maybe friendly or warm or empathetic or whatever. And you identify that maybe if you were to be empathetic, if this person were to be empathetic or warm, clients are more likely to go along with the things they're suggesting. And therefore, they'll end up getting more sales. They'll end up having shorter conversations because it's less kind of back and forth, argumentary, et cetera, et cetera. But this one behavior, as I'm explaining it, you can probably see is solving 3 or 4 problems. And that's the behavior you want to go for. Don't try not to go for behaviors unless you've already exhausted every other avenue. Try not to go for behaviors that only affect one very small portion of their conversation. It's best to start off with behaviors that are small but have large impacts. So like tone of voice is one of the things if you're obviously in a sales or service environment, but each industry might have different things you work on. So identify that through your observations is key. And that allows you, again, going back to my reverse engineering thing that I spoke about last time, then you can start to figure out what are the questions I ask from this person as I go into the conversation to drive them to that point a little bit, right? As much as you want people's input when you go into coaching sessions, and I might be skipping a little bit ahead here, as much as you want the input, as much as you want the input and you want the reflections, one thing we'll speak about a bit later is you also want to have a certain point you want to get out of the conversation as well. So that's the only thing I would add on to what you said. Everything you said was fantastic, Bill.
To summarize and put it like a nail in that before we move on, I guess ultimately you just want to try and lock onto those 1 or 2 things. Rome's not built in a day, right? So if you've got a consultant and they're doing 10 things not very well, just pick 1, pick 2 that you think is going to have the most reach, the most impact. Sometimes if you're just starting working that with a consultant, it's also fine just to pick an easy one, even if it's maybe not the one that has the biggest impact, if you're going to get some runs on the board and they're going to start to see some progress. Because you might find that the person that's not motivated starts to get motivated as soon as they start getting a pat on the head every now and then, in my experience.
Yeah, that's interesting you say about the pick one that's easy. The one thing I would slightly adjust that a little bit from my perspective is even with the ones that have big impact, the action can be easy. So I'll break that down as we go, but like I 100% love the 1% idea because the more 1%ers, the more easy little wins you can put together. They feel good about themselves 100%. I don't always think that has to be the behavior that's easy though. It can also be the action that you do to bring that behavior to life can be easy and easily actionable straight away.
It's quite interesting how often that sort of stuff snowballs. Like if you pick 1 or 2 like really small, easy behaviors, you'll find that they'll often just tidy up a few other things as well. Because I'm already doing this, I may as well do that. So that's key. So just to kind of finish off with that, let's where we're up to. So you've done your preparation for the session and you're setting your agenda. Now your agenda should probably be 2 points maximum that you're trying to work on, things that you want to nail on focus. You should probably at that point, to Jules's point, have an idea of where you want the conversation to go. Obviously it's going to be consultant driven, but you are going to have a rough idea of where you want that endpoint to be before you kind of get stuck in. Right? So that's setting your agenda. Now comes to the session, you've got your agenda, you've got that down. First things first, and this is crucial, assume you've got 30 minutes, do not go straight into the agenda. You've got to take a little bit of time, get the person warm, get them talking a little bit. To spend, I would say 5 minutes, just having your chin wet, right? And I do this a lot. And if any of my consultants end up saying, I don't do this for any particular reason. I do because I care about my consultants as well. If you're a leader and you're not genuinely interested in your people's lives, you're probably in the wrong role, in my opinion. Right? Like you should genuinely care for the people that you work with. And so spend 5 minutes, get to know, how was your weekend? What'd you get up to? Oh, how's the dog going that you just bought? Those kind of bits and pieces. And you'll find that one, that'll get them in the mood to start talking a little bit. It'll open them up a little bit. It'll relax them. Because sometimes people come into a coaching session thinking that this is going to be like pulling teeth. And by just making it friendly, creating that like warm social environment, that's going to be the key. And then from there, I would hit it with the agenda statement. I would usually kind of transition with some kind of question. The question I use all the time, I'll ask them how they're going, how's life, blah, blah, blah. How's work going? I always start with that question to get a sense of like how they feel they're going before we get into. I'm like, perfect. Well, look, I've got a couple of things that I wanted to talk about today. I want to talk about A and B. I don't know if you do this, Jules. I always then ask, is there anything you'd like me to add to the list of things we're going to talk
Yeah,
about today? And
always.
sometimes I'm like, I've got a few small questions about a few processes. And I'm like, perfect. I'll add that to my list. We'll come to it at the end if we don't cover them off during the session. That's how I do it. What about yourself?
Oh, mate, perfect. Yeah, it's really important, as you said before, starting off with that engagement for sure, especially for your first coaching session. Do not forget to engage at the start. I mean, even if you're one of those people that say, I'm a no BS kind of person, I like to get straight into brass tacks. Well, sometimes those brass tacks might be a little bit sharp if you don't engage a little bit. So engage a little bit at the very start for sure. With the agenda, 100%. Usually what I do is I tell them what I want to get out of this session first, and then at the end I go, okay, is there anything else you want to cover off in this session, or you want to get out of coaching in general? That's the opportunity to kind of add something. We were speaking a bit offline, Bill, is that you're talking about a 30-minute coaching session, and usually our coaching sessions in our industries anyway are around about 30 minutes. But whatever it is, best practice is to aim for 90% of that. So 90% of that is actual coaching, and 10% of that is the other stuff, the engagement. Or if you want to leave some time at the end and they want to talk something personal, or they want to talk through something else that's probably not to do with the behaviors that you want to kind of uncover in that session, that's awesome. Like, leave that time for that, right? So, and you'll get better and better at this. As you get more experience, you get better and better. And the more coaching sessions you're in with them, with this person, if it's your 6th coaching session, it's going to be a hell of a lot faster and more efficient than your first one, because you just know what you're talking about. You've got a bit of a rhythm and a cadence going. So don't freak out if you're absolutely maxing those 30 minutes or the amount of time you have. I still do it. I know, Bill, I know you do it. I know we get in trouble half the time as well, because we're, as you can tell, we love a bit of a chin wag. But you will get more efficient. There is definitely ways you can be efficient with that as well. Now that we've kind of covered the agenda a little bit, what do we cover in the agenda? To give you a bit of a guide around what you cover in the agenda, I'll jump into that a little bit. So one is 100% you can say, go in there going, hey, I want to have a conversation about your performance. You can introduce the idea of a metric at this point if you want to, right? So you can say something like, I want to really talk about your performance. In particular, I want to talk about your sales or how long you're taking on phone calls over the last week. I've done some observations, but I'm also interested to know your ideas on what you want to do differently. Is usually a line, and I kind of say something similar to that. So I say I've got my observations, but I also want them to participate in this. This isn't going to be a one way. You're going to be like, yeah, don't worry about it. And then I jump into the idea of, okay, what do you want to get out of this coaching session now that I've told you what metric and what behavior we're going to be discussing essentially? And that's my agenda. How does yours kind of,
Yeah, pretty similar. It's that last piece that's a really important piece. Like, it's okay, so let's say AHT targets 12 minutes. I don't know, just pulling numbers out of thin air, right? So our target's me 12 minutes. Currently, you're at 13 and a half. Where do you think you'd like to see yourself sit by the end of the week? Or where do you think you'd like to see yourself sit sooner or later, now that we know that it's important to the business, or whatever the case may be? That's usually kind of how I'll start with the agenda.
Yep.
From there, once we've had that conversation, and this is where it comes into like the next piece, it's kind of a bit of a, and again, this is why I don't like the grow model, because you're very much flowing between where we are, where we want to be, and that part is kind of like we're amalgamating the two, like it's kind of a back and forth. Once we've kind of got an idea of like where we are and where we want to be, that's when it's probably the most important part of the session. You'd agree, Jules? Really, it's like when we start to actually get into like how we get from A to B.
Yeah.
And the difference, once you've given the agenda statement, you've said, this is what we're going to talk about today. You've gotten their buy-in, and they're like, yeah, Bill, I absolutely 100% want to be at 12 minutes by the end of the week. Let's go. What are we going to do? Right? The difference between a good leader and one who's not kind of letting people down a little bit is how you respond next. If you start being like, well, I've listened to calls and I've noticed you're doing this, and this, what are you going to do about it? Right?
Yeah, you crap.
Not helpful. So when we say at the start, ask, not tell, it doesn't mean go in with very direct, pointed questions. It's the opposite. Yeah. It is very much, you start with like really broad, sweeping, open questions, which is very much like the question you just asked then, Jules. So where do you think the gap is? What do you think you could do? How do you feel about your calls at the moment? What do you think is driving your AHT? And get them really nice, open questions, and then they'll start to give you answers. Usually, I don't know about you, Jules, if I ask a question like that, you'll probably get a one-word answer. Sometimes, like they'll give you a very like short, sharp, is this. Yeah. And then that's when you have to probe a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. So go for the agenda. I really want to get understanding of, do they understand where they sit within the team, within the organization? Have they done some reflective work? Because then I can understand how much of a grind this is going to be in some ways. If I ask some of those questions, if I go, okay, talk me through where do you think you are in terms of your X performance or X metric? And they go, I don't know, I haven't looked at it forever.
Oh, right.
Then that kind of tells me a little bit. So, I mean, it isn't always their fault as well. It could be their previous leader, could be a bunch of other factors, really. They could be new to the business. We don't know. Anyway, but if you get a complete nothing for some of those questions, you kind of know, okay, what I need to do now is kind of build expectations from the very beginning. I need to kind of start to incorporate a little bit of teaching alongside the coaching with this coaching session as well. And that's where the dynamicness you've spoken about before, Bill, comes in. Grow. There are other models out there, and they're all really good. They're really good to allow you to plan the session, but a true coaching session is dynamic in every sense of the word. You have to really play to your audience. So if you're going in the instance of, as you said before, if you start off with goal with that person who has no clue what their metric is, what's your goal? And they go, I didn't even know that was a metric. And you go, Jesus, it's like we're not going anywhere. So you want to really understand what they're thinking, what their thought process is right now, what are their concerns currently at work, and hopefully start to dotted line bridge that gap back into what you want to talk about. So I always talk about current reality or currently what's happening. Then you kind of share your observations. If they say, no, I don't know what it is, you go, okay, that's fantastic. That's fine. Like here, share screens, whatever you want to do. You go, as you can see, this is where everyone's sitting. This is what you're kind of sitting at the moment. And these are business expectations. Here's the point to go. Then you can go to them. Instead of the question, it could be instead of where you're sitting. That's pretty obvious now. You can go to, what do you feel about that? Right? You turn into a little bit of a psychologist maybe, but you go, what do you feel about that? Because you want the answer to be, if they're kind of at the lower end of the spectrum here, they're probably going to go, oh, geez, yeah, not great. I want to get to that point. And that's your fuel, your motivation to use to then go into, okay, how do we get there? Now that we know we want to get there, we know it's important. We've discussed that because it's a business expectation. It's really good for your personal growth.
Yeah.
Then we go, how do we actually physically get there?
Leads me to our point for a lot of new leaders as well. As much as we say ask questions and we've asked all these great open questions, you will get people that will just have no idea. Like it will happen. I've been in one-on-ones before. I've played a call for someone once and I was like, so how do you think the call was? And I'll sit there and be like, yeah, it was great. And I vividly remember one that it was genuinely the worst call I've ever heard in my life. Like everything about it, they were rude, the whole nine, they're horrible. And you kind of sit there in that situation like, okay, so if you get yourself in that situation and you're talking at metrics, you're asking, what do you think you can do? Where do you think you'll start? Whatever the case may be, those open questions. Don't be afraid if they have no idea. Yeah. Just make sure that when they say they're not too sure, the next thing you say is not the answer. It is a question that points towards the answer, right? So one thing I'm really big on, and I know you are as well, Jules, is for the start of all customer-based interactions, is also very much like taking that time to tell the customer that we've understood their question, repeat the question back to them so we've got full understanding, and then give them a very firm, I can help you with this. Because it kind of gives the consultant control of the call. And so if I know my consultants are not doing that, I'll just ask questions like, so how do you feel the call starts? How do you feel this goes? What do you think happens here? What was it the customer was, what do you normally get back from customers at the start of the call? What are you normally doing? What do you normally say?
Yeah,
and kind of really dig into specific things and just keep asking questions until they got, I guess I could X, Y, Z, you know?
Yeah, and don't be afraid to repeat yourself or rephrase questions differently. So if you've asked a question and it feels like it hasn't landed, or you just get a deer in headlights look from your consultant where they go, what? And don't be afraid to kind of go, okay, that's fine. And then reapproach that question. I do it all the time. Not everyone thinks the way you do, so it's completely fine for them to not understand in the first go. And it's a lesson for them as well around when they're dealing with their customers as well, that they can definitely reapproach the conversation in a different way. You want to really dial down into the why, what they're currently in, and then the why they're doing what they're doing as well. So
just want to quickly circle back a sec, right, to something you were just saying. Sorry to cut you off a little bit. But I'll also say this, when they are like a deer in the headlights, and this is a bit of it's Bill's pro tip. This is Bill's pro tip number 3.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to let them sit and think for a little bit as
For
well.
sure.
I feel like some people, if they have absolutely no idea and you've given them time to think, of course, absolutely, that's fine. Rephrase the question a couple of times. But sometimes people just need to, like Jules said, they don't think the same way that we think. You have the answer in your mind. They don't know, they need to have a bit of a think. And so don't be afraid to sit there in silence for like 20, 30 seconds and let them think before you maybe start to reposition and prompt them again. Because sometimes they'll find the answer, and sometimes we feel awkward and we feel the urge to jump in and give the answer.
Yeah.
And you have to resist that urge at absolute all costs.
Correct. Yeah. A bit of discomfort tells you that you're learning. The discomfort is a
Really
true
good call.
indicator that learning is happening. So it's fine to be uncomfortable. A
Absolutely.
sales trainer that I had
Absolutely.
ages ago, and it's always stuck with me, gave me this line, and it's, he who speaks first loses. And when it comes to these scenarios, if you're asked a fantastic open question, and it's an open question, don't be afraid to sit there in silence for sure, for like at least 20, 30 seconds. Give it a little bit of time to marinate in the head. Especially, we've kind of been really positive around our people so far, but we know there are people that may not have the greatest intention when it comes to their workplace or yourself. And if you've identified that yourself and you want to make them feel uncomfortable at that point, it's not a bad idea to ask questions, because if you jump in and save them, they will let you do that for sure. They'll let you do that. They'll let you get away with
Every time.
30 minutes of straight talking from you, because they know that's the best way to avoid being actually performance coached. So
Yeah, and
jump
make any
in.
change, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, 100%. Resist the urge to jump in if there is a bit of silence for
Yeah.
sure.
So, kind of to recap what we've got so far. So you've done your prep work, you've come in, you've set a really tight, nice agenda, you've got their buy-in. They're like, yes, Jules, absolutely, I'm in love with it. Let's keep going. And then you've had that question, you've dug into the behavior, whatever it may be. You've like really gotten down to nitty-gritty of like where they're going wrong, what they could be doing differently, and you've had them realize it. The question then is how to turn that into an action, how to get that into a behavior. Now, something that I know you will agree with me 100% on this. You want to try and make the action that you get them to commit to, the thing that you try to change, to be as small as possible. Like it needs to be specific, very, very specific. At the start of the call, they are going to do this, and I'm going to say this, this, and this. And I'm not talking about scripting, like verbatim, exact words, this,
No.
but just like, for example, just to circle back to it, my example, when my consultants get a call, I would expect them to repeat the inquiry back to the customer and then say that they can help with it. It's very specific. It's like an actual, you either did that or you did not do that. It's objective. There's no subjectivity to it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And the thing with like making behaviors that are like more specific and more granular like that, people are more likely to stick to them. They're much easier to stick to. It's easier for them to like keep a little tracker in a notepad to see how they've gone with it. Did I remember to do it on that last call? Yes or no? And then also it's much easier for them to like follow the flow through with that and to keep doing it, to report back to me whether it was done or not. It's very easy for me to like listen in and see if they're doing it or not, because it's objective. Whereas a lot of people tend to fall into the habit of setting really vague goals. I'm just going to sound friendlier on call.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does sound friendlier on calls mean? I'm just going to greet the customer when they come in the door of the shop. How? What are you going to say? What are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, this is a really important thing. And so whenever you're thinking and you're putting together what it is that you want the person to work on, try to get them to target one specific thing that they are going to say or do, or a couple of specific things that they can say or do in various situations. And then this is an absolute gem, a pearl of wisdom straight from the mind of Julian Lawrence, stolen by me right here, right now. A fantastic thing to then do is to then ask them, okay, but what if? And then a what if question. What if this goes wrong? What if that doesn't happen? What are you then going to do? Absolute ripper question. I 100% stole that from you. Not even going to pretend that I did not. Do you want to talk us through that one a little bit, Jules?
Yeah, for sure. It's removing any doubt. So we talk about actions being really easy and being really specific. Once you come up with a specific action, you want to really understand from the consultant's points, are there any doubts? Are there any doubts at all that they can perform this on their very next interaction or the next 10 interactions, whatever you choose? And so you want to keep digging until you find if there's what ifs, because some people just tell you what you want to hear as a leader, as a coach, right? So they won't just say, I just want to get out of this 30 minutes unscathed. So I will just tell Bill, yeah, for sure, Bill, I really love you. You're the bee's knees. And what you just suggested is the best thing ever.
Sounds sick. Let's go.
Yeah, correct. I don't know. I've never heard anything as good as since sliced bread. And they're going ahead and actioning all this stuff. unfortunate thing is, so they will tell you things you want to hear. So you want to identify, are they truly buying into this action? Are they truly buying into this behavior? And how reasonable is it for them to do it? We'll talk about a little bit later around SMART goals and how we can do that. But this will feed into that a little bit as well, around making those goals achievable. Yeah. And then you just want to go, what if? So if for that example, again, you want to repeat the response back to your client. A good example around that, you go, okay, take me through a time when that's not going to be possible. Right.
Mhm.
And they might say, oh, if the client's in a rush, or they're really angry or whatever, you know what I mean? And this is your
Well, if the
moment
client's really angry, it's like, he
yeah,
won't.
correct. Yeah.
Oh,
So they'll give
yeah,
you all those
every
lovely
time.
reasons, those classic reasons, right? This is where you can really, really kind of stick the landing as a coach and a leader,
Mhm.
because then you go, okay, if a client comes in frustrated or angry, why is it more important that we rephrase their
Mhm.
inquiry? You want to really double
Circle back
down
in.
on that. You want to, if you've already put a bit of chocolate icing on that cake, you want to now put the ganache all over it. You want to really slather that, really bring that home. And sometimes when you do that, they go, oh, it kind of gets them to reflect and go, well, we've chosen this behavior for a reason. We've chosen this because it's useful for those hard moments, not only the easier
Mhm.
moments. And then that's when for sure you've chosen a behavior that's going to be bang for buck as well.
Absolutely. And the way to really, like you mentioned, that you kind of stick the landing when we're at that point, the way to absolutely drive that home, 1 to 2 brief role plays. Everybody hates it. I'm going to say it right now. I said the word role play. A bunch of you listening cringed. I don't want to do
Yes.
role plays with my
Yes.
consultant. My consultant doesn't want to do role plays. Everyone hates doing them, but they hate doing them because they're uncomfortable. And they need to be uncomfortable because
Yeah.
the person is going to be saying things they don't normally say. It's going to be uncomfortable. You need to hear it come out of their teeth, out of their lips. And the amount of times that you have a coaching session with someone, you'll discuss a behavior, nailed on the line, I can absolutely do that. And you go, let's do a role play. And then you ask them to do it. And the thing they say back to you is nothing that you just spoke about whatsoever. It happens all the time.
Shamble.
And then you just kind of circle back, well, okay, did we touch on point A, B, and C? No, we did not. Okay, so if we're going to redo it, have our time again, how are we going to do it? And then you kind of deep dive into it. And I just don't think there's anything more powerful in that session. Like all of it, it's kind of like a coaching session is some of its parts. But like if you miss that step, you can still have a good coaching session. But doing the role play is what will take your sessions from like 80% accurate, 80% successful to being nailed on 100% successful. I think.
Here's a Julian tip, probably the first Julian tip ever for all these
Pro
episodes.
tip, let's go.
I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Bill. So the way I approach role plays, and I do love them because I've 100%, they are a great way to practice. And if you can do it in safety of a coaching environment, you can do it in the pressure of your client interaction, for example.
I agree.
Now, I fool them into role plays in terms of I lull them into a false sense of security of role plays. I don't say I'm going to do a role play. I actually, the question I asked them, he goes, okay, fantastic note you've got to be doing. How will that sound on the phone?
I love that one.
And so I go straight into it. I don't even let them reflect for a second that it's a role play. And I go straight into, how does that sound on the phone? And when they start to answer, I'm like, okay, so I'm a customer. I come in with this, and I pick the scenario straight away. And I say this. What are you going to say back? They're role playing with me. They don't even know it, right? That's my way of kind of, if you've got people that are maybe cringe at role plays and say, oh, I'm really uncomfortable around role plays. Well, you're role playing 50 times a day for your role, so I don't know what you're on about. But
I've heard your fake phone laugh. I know it's a role play.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, but in saying that, so if a way you can do that is you don't say you can avoid the word role play or practice maybe, and then create it as a flow in your conversation, your coaching conversation, where you're going, okay, now that we know what you're going to do, what do you think that's going to sound like? Give me an idea what's going to sound like. You know what I mean? Put that in your own words.
Actually,
things like that.
I really like the pro tools tip. I also definitely don't go to role play, but I really love that question. That question's like really powerful. How does that sound on the phone? What's that going to look like? I will say this to the people out there listening right now. I almost guarantee the first time they do it, it's not very good. Like it is foreign to them. And that's why we're here, like Jules says, in the comfort of our safety environment. Don't get frustrated if they don't stick to landing the first time or even the second time. It is a work in progress. And I will kind of circle back to this probably at the very end. You really have to take the time before the session. And when you've set commitments, you set goals, you've done all the rest of the things we're going to talk about. So let consultants know there is no failure with trying these things on the phone.
Yeah.
They either try it and it works, happy days, let's move on, or they try it and it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, perfect. Let's listen to it. Let's look at the chat. Let's listen to the call. Let's look at the interaction. What didn't work? Ultimately, most roles, whether it's in like retail customer service, on the phones, like in places we work, it's a numbers game. You're going to keep getting customers through the door. So that's perfect. Let's just keep churning and trying new things until we find that thing that works. I used to make the exact same jokes on every single call I was on the phone. Every time, same jokes. And I vividly remember my team leader turning around one day, marking my calls. It's like, do you have to make the same joke on every call? And I replied, and I was like, did they laugh? And he's like, oh, I mean, they did. And I was like, there you go. I know it works. My bread and butter. And so that's what you want your consultants to do, is to get to that point. They try it until they find what works for them. And so there is no failure.
That's a really good one. You build a catalog, same thing for coaching. You got to find out what works for you. And sometimes it becomes repetitive. And that's sometimes the hard part of coaching and leadership, because I've been doing so many coaching sessions. I've done hundreds and hundreds of coaching sessions by this point. They kind of sound very similar in my head sometimes. And it's because I've identified what works really well for me when I'm sitting with people. And I'm almost like now to the point where certain personality types, I know what's going to work with them. So I go in with that line of attack because I know it's going to work more often than not. And that can kind of get a little bit boring at times.
I've spent ages at the start talking about how great coaching feels when you see the stick landing. And I feel like what you're saying there, I agree with 100%. The actual coaching sessions become monotonous especially if you coach the same people all the time. I've had people in my team for over a year. We've had very similar coaching sessions before with that same person, probably. But it's very much like Muhammad Ali says, you do all the sit-ups, you hate doing the sit-ups, but you suffer through it and you get to live your life as a champion. It's kind of like that. You go into a session, you may feel like you're a routine, but when you listen to that call and they're doing it and it's working and they're chuffed with their own success and they're coming to you, eyes light up, just like, I tried and it worked. It's worth it. It's worth all of that. Every single piece. It's worth all the hours of observations you're doing. So one last thing from us, Jules, the pinnacle point, as much as I said that the role plays are the most important thing, was actually the most important thing. I straight up lied. No, stand by it. Role plays are important. Role plays are important, but the session will 100% fall apart if there's no commitment. It's like a sales call. If there's no ask at the end, if you don't ask for the sell at the end, it'll fall apart. And a coaching session will fall apart if there's no commitment. You might have a great conversation. They'll have all these great realizations. But if you don't get them to lock in on something that they're going to do, take away, commit to you, to get back to you, they're probably, the chance of them taking it up is low, I would say, even if you've just had the best session in the world. Would you agree?
No, 100%. If you're not having a commitment and action at the end of your coaching conversation, again, no coaching took place here. So
it's not written down, didn't happen.
Yeah, correct. So, and that is so often the thing that gets missed by most leaders. In my observation, even working with, like I do coach to coach sessions with people, like where I'm coaching leaders and stuff like that. And the biggest observation I have is really funny. They do all these fantastic things. They've asked open questions. They've done all these awesome things at the start. And the coaching session just ends with, oh, okay, yeah, cool. So you've got to work on X behavior. Yeah, fantastic. Cool. And it just ends there. There's no kind of understanding of how often are we going to be doing this thing? Are we starting straight away? Are we starting next week? Is it on most of my calls? Is it only on half of my calls? How many am I going to be doing this on? So all those things have not been decided. So lo and behold, when you come to your next coaching session, and it's maybe a week from now, 2 weeks from now, it might be the next day, I don't know. But you kind of go, oh, how did you go with that? They could tell you anything. Doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? They could tell you, yeah, I did well. According to what standard, what benchmark, what metric are we deciding that well, what does well mean? I tried my hardest. I thought good thoughts while that part of the conversation started. So I did well. And you've got to take that answer because you have nothing else to measure it by. By God's sake, please, please, please have a commitment at the very end. And that's probably, the second most vital thing.
Everyone listening to this has probably heard the term SMART goal before. It is a bit of a cliche. Even I set SMART goals for my people. I still hate it. I hate the term. It makes me cringe a little bit hearing and seeing the word SMART goal. But I do think it needs to be most of those things. First things first, like everything else in our coaching session, it absolutely has to be specific. I'm going to do this. And then it also needs to be measurable. I'm going to do X amount of Y, right? It needs to be measurable. Obviously, it needs to be realistic. This is why I hate SMART goal. Why would I ever set an unrealistic goal with my people? And then achievable also means the same thing, which annoys me. But then we also need a time frame. So, for example, the way that I tend to set goals with a lot of my people, I don't know how you do it, Jules, will come to that in a second.
Yeah.
I'm like, usually perfect. Okay, excellent. Let's say we've set a goal to do something specific on live chat, so talking around a certain behavior, or even the behavior I spoke about earlier. We'll keep it in theme. So, repeating the inquiry and saying, I can help with that. Let's say that's the goal on calls. Usually, what I'll say is, how many calls do you think you'll take before the end of tomorrow? So, you've got the rest of today, you've got tomorrow. How many calls do you think you'll take? And then the answer, 50, say. Okay, excellent. On those 50 calls, how many do you think you'll have the situation where you need to be using this thing? And then like, of this thing, of restating the inquiry, it probably should be all 50. I'm like, okay, so that you can do it on all 50, how many are we actually going to do it on? Because it's not going to be 50, right? How many do you actually think like genuinely that you can do? And this is when it comes down, like some people will go, oh no, 50, nailed on 50. Some people will go, oh, 25. And that's when we need to start being like, okay, so 25. So how important do you think this is on a scale of 1 to 10? Like the thing we just spoke about, how important do you think it is? Oh, 8. Okay, so it's an 8 out of 10, but you're only going to do it on 50% of the call. And then usually you'll kind of use that kind of like, how important is it to steer them towards a number that you think is accurate? I don't know, usually I shoot for about 70 to 80%.
Yep.
Like 3/4 to 4/5 for most things, if it's that important, if it's a really serious behavior. And then it's like, okay, excellent. So we're going to aim for 35 of the next 50 calls, we're going to do this on. How are you going to keep track of that? Oh, I'm going to note down on my notepad. Excellent. How are you going to let me know that you're doing it? And then it's keep a note on the trackpad, send that to you, and then send you 2 examples where I've done it. And so at this point, I've set a goal. I know exactly how much they're going to be doing. So it's 35 or 50, which is also measurable. They're also going to let me know. They're like nailed on, locked in. And then the following day, I shoot them a message being like, hey, so don't forget you've got to send me 2 calls today. How are you going so far this morning?
Yeah.
Bang. That's how I do it. What about yourself?
Yeah, 100%. I want to start my part of this with a bit of an analogy that I use with consultants all the time. And the analogy is this, right? So pretend a friend comes up to you and goes, hey, mate, we were going to run a marathon in 6 months' time, right? Now, a marathon, for those who don't know, is like 52 kilometers, something like 48 miles.
26.2 miles.
What is it? 36.2 miles?
A marathon is 26.2.
Oh, 26.2, but what's that? So 50 something kilometers, isn't it? Yeah, whatever. It's a long way. Let's just put it that way, right? You're running a long way. Anyway, you go to marathon, you've got 6 months to prepare. There's 2 types of people here. One person will go, listen, I need to prepare. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my headphones on, my runners on, and I'm going to leave my house, run till I'm dog tired, and somebody has to drag me all the way home, right? And I'll do that every day for the next 6 months. The other person goes, listen, tomorrow I'm going to start off by running 1 kilometer. Next day I'm going to run 2. Next day I'm going to run 3. But they record this somewhere. They probably write it down on a notepad or on their phone, whatever it is. They've got their Fitbit on, whatever, and they slowly increase it progressionally over time. Question to you, Bill: which one of those 2 people do you think is going to be more prepared for a marathon come 6 months?
Well, it's definitely the second one. For sure.
100%.
Because the first one's probably going to have some kind of injuries, and they're probably going to give up because they hate running, because every time they run till they're dead.
Correct. The main thing around this is just human psychology. The road to success is built on good intentions. Both have great intentions, right? To start off with anyway. Both have great intentions. They just want to improve themselves and get to the point where they're ready. And they're hitting the challenge head on. But one is measuring how they're going in a realistic, progressional way. And so even if you follow that maths in your head, if they run 1 kilometer extra every day, by the time they get to the marathon, they've run the marathon distance at least a few times. So this person's going to be like, man, I've done this a few times. You got this. You go ahead and smash it. The other guy's got no clue. It really depends on your level of fitness. You might only be lasting 200 meters every day. You have no clue whether you can run 52 kilometers. So the reason why I use this analogy to people is 100% I'm on the same vein as you, Bill. The only difference is sometimes I pick, depending on what time of the day the coaching session is, if it's kind of anywhere from the morning to middle of the day, I will even pick the rest of the day as a goal. Because especially if it's the first time they're doing it, it's the good way to dip your toe in the water. It's 12 o'clock now. What time do you finish? 5 o'clock. How many calls do you reckon you take from now till 5 o'clock, you reckon? And they'll 20 calls, 30 calls. Okay, fantastic. How many out of those do you reckon you can do this on? And if they say 15 out of 20, what I want you guys to stay away from, and we kind of mentioned this, is percentages, quarters, anything that's not a finite number. The reason being is because that changes every day. I don't know what industry you're in, but most people don't really have the same day every day. So if you're picking percentages, it's too vague for people, and it's too hard to say whether you've achieved it. Nobody's sitting at the end of the day and goes, oh, what's 75% of the amount of calls I took today? It's just not a
Mm,
realistic thing. Whereas
I
if you're
agree.
saying 13 out of 20, you can go 1, 2, tick it. You can do a tally on your notepad next to you where your computer or on your computer, and you can tick that 13th off, and that's going to feel fantastic to tick that 13th one off if that's what your goal has been. Talking about building little 1%ers that they can have success at. That's going to make them feel awesome at the end of the day to go, hey, Jules, hey, Bill, I did 13. And you get to have that proud dad, mum moment. Go, yes, well done. So pick finite numbers. With the one where you're talking about around, if they pick only half the calls or half the things, interactions in the day, they're going to be able to action the behavior that you spoke about. You want to build some of that a bit earlier. We spoke about it before around the what ifs. You ideally want to get a lot of those doubts out of the way. So when it comes to this moment and they pick only half, we go back to go, okay, we spoke about before, we spoke about what will get in the way, and we kind of eliminated a lot of those. So talk me through why you're picking only half. And then they'll go, oh, actually, no, maybe I can do 70 or 80.
Yeah.
Work before you get to that point, in my opinion. You can 100% tie it back to other stuff as well. The other thing I like to ask them sometimes is the SMART goal achievable bit. So I like to ask them, can you give me a rating out of 10, how confident you are you can do this on your next call or next interaction? And if they say 7 or something, and you go, okay, what do you reckon will get you to a 10? And the good answer to that should be just me practicing it. If I do it a lot more times, I'll get there. I'll get to 10. If they say something, they say, oh, I'm not sure, whatever the case is, then you kind of, again, you really don't want to leave stuff on the table. You want to go back to what if and what's going to go wrong into the SMART goal. So you kind of detailed you can get with the goal, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And like, to your point, it's got a lot of like circling back to it, right? Like every time that there's a doubt, you dig into why there's a doubt. So the first we're like, okay, when do you not think you could do it? And I'll tell you, and then you dig into that a little bit. And then it's like, okay, well, how confident do you feel? I feel this confident. Okay, well, why is that not a 10? And it's just like, it's never quite, it's more just asking them why, right? Like it's never much more pointed than that. It's never more aggressive than that. You're never giving any reason. You're just asking them to provide you why. And personally, you find more often than not, they don't have one.
Yeah.
And it's in their mind the reason that it's not a 10 is because they don't feel confident doing it. There's no actual other reason behind that. And the more that you can get them to realize that, like, actually, there's no blockers stopping me from doing this. I'm just going to do it and give it a crack. And I also really like the idea as well, specifically around the next one. How do you think you can go on the next one? Rate it out of 10. That's really good. And I definitely think to the point of getting them to track it and stuff, be really specific with the numbers. Like I said, aim to 75%. That's for your brain. They should aim with 75%. They should be aiming for like 35 or 50. Yeah. But that send me 1 to 2 examples is key. Because if you tie that send me 1 to 2 examples in there, I also think that's when you stress. This is the point to nail home. You can send me a bad one. I don't think you have to send me one where you nail it. Like send me 1, send me 2. Send me one where you think it goes well. If they all go well, perfect. If you get one that's an absolute stinker, send it through. They're the ones that I'm very keen to listen to. Where did we go wrong? Let's have a look. And then we can fix it. And together, you and I, we can work on it and get it where it needs to be. And that is quite empowering for a lot of people to know that, like, oh, Bill said he's going to help me if I do this wrong. Yeah. And it'll really help kind of tie that together.
So send me 2 good ones and 1 bad one. 2 good ones and 1 bad one all the time.
I like that.
And I will observe them and send it back to you in terms of feedback. I think is as well, set a time limit before we move on, is to set a time limit as to when they're going to get back to you as well. So if you're saying that the goal is 15 out of 20 calls and they're going to send you 2 good ones and 1 bad one, or 1 bad, 1 good, it doesn't matter. When are they doing this? End of the day, end of the week, in a couple of days, by Tuesday, by Wednesday. Pick a certain time frame that this is going to be happening for. Otherwise, like again, it's one of those things, you get to the next coaching session, you've both forgotten what's happened. You want it to be relatively quickly and a real finite time. And then you can calendar that time as well.
I handed, I'm going to air quotes this, I handed a telling off earlier today. I had a coaching session with someone and I was like, hey, you didn't get back to me 2 weeks ago. What's that all about? So you've got to, if they don't get back to you, that's also a different problem. That's a different conversation to have.
Yeah.
Now, the last thing from me, so just to give a ground up recap of everything we've gone through so far. So you've done your prep work, you've done your agenda, you've asked those questions, you've got them to identify where they're going wrong. You've then worked on where they're going wrong. You've had a couple of role plays. You've set a really nice tight commitment. They've left the coaching session. The one last thing, and I've said it already, and I cannot stress this enough, if it's not written down, it did not happen.
Yeah.
You need to document the coaching session. It is the worst part of doing it, but everything needs to be written down. I personally fill the notes out as I go. My consultants knowing doing that, and I send them a copy as well. It's always really good for them to have access to. It's not like secret notes that we hide away for performance management conversations down the line. Like these are open, like if they ever want their notes, they can have them.
Yeah.
Every time they can have them. It's good for them to have them to be able to look back on and reflect on what we spoke about.
Correct.
Especially if you're trying some specific scripting. Like if you and them have worked together on something that they feel comfortable saying in a way that
Yes.
they're going to do things, having it written down for them is going to help. And then make sure you document it. And it does come down to if you do have those people that are challenging or are not performing in their role, when it comes time to have more serious performance conversations, if you don't have any records, none of those sessions happened as far as HR are concerned as well. Not that we like to talk about that sort of stuff, but it is a reality of the role. You are going to get to the point, probably in your career at some point, you're going to have those conversations. And it is so much easier to have when you're like, on this date, I coached to this. Like if there's a specific thing they're not doing, maybe they're not adhering to their roster. I've had 11 conversations. These are the dates. This is what we spoke to. This is what they've agreed to. They've got a copy of it in their email. It definitely really strengthens your position. Jules, that, as far as I'm concerned, that's a coaching session. That's end-to-end, bell to bell, from when you start doing it before they go to when you finish when they leave. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up today?
Yeah, just a tip on the note-taking. There's a couple of things you can do to make your life easier when it comes to note-taking. Having to take 1 million notes. You can do it on the Outlook invite itself, is one you can do. A lot of people's companies have access to OneNote in the Outlook itself, so you can do that there or in the Outlook invite itself. So you can go in. I used to do that in a previous workplace where I used to go into the actual Outlook invite and put it in there. If you don't have a coaching hub or a hub to upload your coaching notes into, some companies do, some companies don't. Or you can just write out an email. I sometimes used to share screens and write the notes in front of them, so they can see exactly what I'm typing as I'm typing it. Because as Bill said, this isn't like I'm not typing "I hate this person" or something. It's usually it's completely unemotional language. Please don't put any emotion. It doesn't matter what you think about what's happened in that moment in the interaction. It's what's happened in the moment of that interaction. So pop that in there and follow that kind of structure. But yeah, email, Outlook, OneNote, if you use one of those three to kind of take note, it doesn't have to be War and Peace either. It can be just dot points, can be a few different bits and pieces in there. But as long as it's captured, for sure, at least the very least the commitment and the actual behavior that they're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, that's about all we have time for today. I feel like we fleshed that out. Hopefully for you listening at home, it was useful. If there was anything that you took from this that you tried and worked, please drop a comment and let us know how you went. If there's anything you think we missed from our coaching guide, do also please let us know. And as always, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It absolutely helps us out a ton. Have a great day.